Imagine buying a brand new home, raising your family, paying your HOA dues, and believing you're safe. Then one day you find out you don't actually own the land under your house. Someone else does. And not only that, he planned it that way from the very beginning. This isn't just a mistake. This was a trap, and 120 families walked straight into it. This story isn't about a simple real estate mix-up. This is about power, race, and control. It's about how a black man, who many thought was powerless, turned the tables on an entire homeowners association. Today, we're breaking down the unbelievable story of how an HOA built 120 homes on land they didn't actually own, and how the man they overlooked used the law to flip the whole situation in his favor. You're not going to believe how deep this goes. Here's the problem. In America, land ownership has always been complicated, especially for black families. For centuries, black landowners were tricked, pressured, or flat-out stolen from. Entire neighborhoods were wiped away through shady deals, eminent domain, or violent intimidation. And because of that, many people believed a black man couldn't stand up to the system, let alone outsmart it. But that's exactly what happened here. An HOA, a system already infamous for being strict, controlling, and sometimes downright predatory, decided to develop land that wasn't fully theirs. They assumed nobody would challenge them. They thought they could outmaneuver the rightful landowner. What they didn't know was that the man they tried to push aside was patient, strategic, and waiting for the right moment to strike back. And when he did, it shocked everybody. Let's rewind. How does an HOA even end up building on someone else's land? The truth is, it starts with arrogance. Developers and HOAs often think money, paperwork, and influence can cover every gap. They push projects through, cut corners, and expect nobody to notice. But here's the thing. Land deeds don't lie. Ownership records are public, and in this case, the black landowner never gave up his rights. The HOA built an entire neighborhood without securing the actual foundation, the dirt it sat on. Think about that. 120 families bought into the American dream. They signed mortgages, painted their walls, planted gardens, sent their kids to the local school. Meanwhile, the real owner of the land watched quietly, knowing the deeper the HOA dug themselves in, the more power he gained. And that's where the trap comes in. Because once those houses were built, the HOA couldn't undo it. They couldn't move the homes. They couldn't erase the fact that hundreds of people were now tied to land that wasn't theirs. The more they fought, the worse it got. And if you think that was wild, wait until you hear what happened when lawyers got involved. Click here, you won't believe it. Here, where this story gets even more complicated. HOAs aren't just neighborhood committees. They're legally binding corporations with the power to fine people, put liens on houses, and even foreclose on homes. They control how high your grass can grow, what color your house can be, and even whether you can park in your own driveway. So imagine the shock of realizing that the same organization telling you how to live in your house doesn't even control the land your house sits on. This wasn't just a minor paperwork error. This was a total collapse of authority. The HOA was powerless, and the landowner, he was the only one who had real control. Now here's the kicker. This wasn't an accident on his part. He didn't just forget to sell the land. He kept the deed intentionally. Every step of the way, he knew what was happening. He saw the neighborhood rising brick by brick, and he stayed silent. Some people might call that sneaky. Others call it genius. But one thing is certain, it was legal. To understand why this story hits so hard, you need to know the history. Land has always been the root of wealth in America. But for black families, holding onto land has always been a struggle. After slavery ended, many freed black families managed to buy farmland. They worked it, passed it down, and tried to build generational wealth. But through scams, predatory laws, and sometimes outright violence, much of that land was taken back. There's a famous statistic. Black farmers once owned about 16 million acres of land in the early 1900s. Today, they own less than 2 million. That's not by accident. That's by design. So when one man manages to not only hold onto his land, but also outwit an entire HOA that tried to take advantage of him, that's not just a personal victory. That's a reversal of history. That's payback for generations of land theft. So how did the HOA react? At first, they tried to flex their power. They sent letters, threatened legal action, tried to intimidate him into giving up. But none of it worked because he wasn't bluffing. He had the receipts, literally. The deed to the land was in his name. The HOA could cry, threaten, or stomp their feet all they wanted. Legally, they were stuck. And here, where the trap slammed shut, the HOA had already sold the homes to buyers. Families were already living there. Mortgages had been signed. Banks had lent out money. Everyone had skin in the game, which meant everyone from the homeowners to the banks now had to answer to the man who owned the land. Do you see how wild that is? He didn't just outsmart the HOA. He had leverage over 120 families and the banks that backed them. That's not just a win. That's checkmate. And if you think that was bold, wait until you hear what he demanded next. You won't believe how the tables turned on the HOA when the court stepped in. Stick around, because this is where the story explodes. Here, where it all comes crashing down, the HOA finally realized they were trapped. They went to court, arguing they had invested millions into building the neighborhood. They said the landowner shouldn't be able to hold them hostage, but the court didn't see it that way. Ownership was ownership. Paperwork was paperwork. And in the eyes of the law, they had built 120 homes on land that wasn't theirs. The landowner didn't just win. He had leverage over every single home in that neighborhood. Imagine the panic. Imagine realizing the place you thought was yours could be taken away, or worse, that you might have to pay the very man you ignored just to keep living there. And the best part, he wasn't even the one who rushed into this fight. He let them build. He let them spend millions. He let them trap themselves. And when the dust settled, he was the only one holding the keys. Now tell me this, do you think the HOA deserved what they got? Or did the landowner go too far? Comment your thoughts below. Cases like this are rare, but they shine a light on something bigger. For years, HOAs and developers have been able to bulldoze through communities, especially black communities, with little resistance. Whole neighborhoods have been erased in the name of urban development. Families have been pushed out by rising taxes, rezoning, or shady deals. And when people fought back, the system usually sided against them. But this story flips that script. For once, the system didn't crush a black landowner. For once, the law worked in his favor, and the result was poetic justice. Let's talk about the homeowners themselves. Imagine being one of those 120 families. You move into a house thinking it's yours. You've got the mortgage, the deed to the home, and you think you're secure. Then you find out the land under your feet belongs to someone else. That changes everything. You can't sell without his approval. You can't refinance without his signature. Your biggest investment, your home, is now tied to a man you didn't even know. Some homeowners were angry at him. They thought he was exploiting them, but others saw the truth. The HOA was the one who created this mess. They were the ones who built on land they didn't own. And if anyone was going to pay the price, it should be the HOA, not the man who simply held onto what was his. This split created even more drama. Neighbors turned on each other. Some wanted to fight him. Others wanted to negotiate. But at the end of the day, the law was clear. The HOA was powerless. So what happened next? Reports say the HOA had to negotiate directly with him. And let me tell you, he didn't walk away empty-handed. He had the upper hand in every meeting, every negotiation. They couldn't bulldoze him, couldn't ignore him, couldn't erase him. For once, the ball was entirely in his court. And here's the lesson. He didn't get there by luck. He got there by patience, strategy, and refusing to give up what was his. While the HOA was moving fast, cutting corners and rushing to build, he was moving slow and steady. And in the end, slow and steady won the race. So here's what we've seen. An HOA, backed by money and arrogance, thought they could steamroll over someone they didn't respect. They built an entire community on land they didn't actually own. But instead of being pushed aside, the black landowner turned their mistake into his weapon. He used the system that had once been used against people like him, and he won. This story is more than just a legal battle. It's a lesson. Never underestimate the power of documentation. Never assume ownership without proof. And never think that the people you ignore won't fight back. Because sometimes the quietest ones are setting the biggest traps. You might think the story ends there, with the landowner victorious and the HOA humiliated. But in reality, that was just the beginning. Because when 120 families realized their homes were sitting on land they didn't own, panic spread like wildfire. People were scared, angry, confused. Some blamed the HOA. Others pointed the finger at the landowner. And some were stuck in the middle, wondering if their mortgages and life savings had just gone up in smoke. The landowner wasn't the type to rush into chaos. He stayed calm, deliberate, and methodical. He knew that in moments like this, fear and confusion worked in his favor. The longer the HOA scrambled, the stronger his position became. But here's the question. What happens when you're not just fighting an HOA, but an entire community of families caught in the crossfire? For the families, the nightmare began when they realized they technically didn't own the dirt under their feet. Imagine paying a 30-year mortgage, only to discover the foundation of your American dream belongs to someone else. Banks started asking questions. Could they even enforce mortgages if the land wasn't secured? Would the homes lose all value? Could the landowner evict people or charge them rent? Rumors spread fast. Some thought the landowner might bulldoze the entire neighborhood. Others feared they'd have to pay him outrageous fees just to stay. Parents worried their kids would lose stability. Retirees wondered if their savings had been wasted. The HOA tried to calm people down, but nobody trusted them anymore. They were the ones who caused the mess. Homeowners demanded answers, and the board had none. Now here, where it gets interesting. The landowner could have cashed out immediately. He could have sued for damages or sold the land at a premium. But he didn't. Instead, he waited. Every day that passed, the pressure mounted on the HOA. Every week, homeowners grew more desperate, and the landowner's leverage only grew stronger. Think of it like a chess game. He wasn't interested in winning a single piece. He wanted checkmate. He wanted the HOA on its knees, begging for terms. And when he finally made his move, it stunned everyone. He proposed a deal, not a sale, not a handover, but a lease. That's right, the landowner told the HOA and homeowners, "You can keep living here, but you're going to pay me rent for the ground your houses sit on, every single year, forever." It was brilliant. Instead of a one-time payout, he turned their mistake into a permanent income stream. 120 families, 120 rent checks, every single month. This kind of move wasn't just financial. It was symbolic. For centuries, black families were forced into tenant farming and sharecropping, paying rent to white landowners who controlled everything. But now, the tables had turned. The HOA and its mostly white homeowners found themselves in the exact position black families had endured for generations, living on land they didn't own, paying rent to someone they had underestimated. It was poetic justice, and it shook the community to its core. Of course, the HOA tried to fight back. They claimed the lease was unfair. They argued it was extortion. They begged the courts to step in and save them. But the judges looked at the facts. Who owned the land? The black landowner. Who failed to secure the deed? The HOA. Case closed. The court ruled that as long as his terms weren't outrageous or predatory, he had every right to charge rent. And guess what? His terms weren't outrageous. They were just high enough to hurt the HOA, but not high enough to be overturned. The HOA was forced to accept the deal. And for the first time in history, a black landowner turned the tables so hard that an entire suburban community became his tenants. But this victory didn't come without backlash. Some homeowners were furious. They saw him as the villain, the man exploiting their mistake. Others quietly admired him. They recognized that he was simply protecting his rights and doing it with a level of brilliance the HOA never expected. Neighbors turned against each other. Lawsuits flew left and right. Some tried to sue the HOA for fraud. Others considered suing the landowner, though those cases collapsed quickly. Families argued at town meetings, voices raised, tempers boiling. The neighborhood wasn't just divided, it was at war with itself. And all the while, the landowner collected rent checks. It wasn't long before the story hit the news. Journalists swarmed the neighborhood. Headlines blared. HOA BUILDS homes on wrong land. Black landowner OUTSMARTS HOA. 120 FAMILIES trapped in legal nightmare. Talk shows debated it. Some called the landowner a genius, a modern-day David taking down Goliath. Others painted him as greedy. But no matter how people felt, one thing was undeniable: he won. And the HOA had no one to blame but themselves. The landowner gave few interviews. When he did speak, he kept it simple. "I'm just protecting what's mine. They thought I was invisible. They thought I didn't matter. Now they know better." Those words spread like fire. For many black viewers, he became a symbol of resilience, proof that you could fight back against a system designed to erase you. Over time, the deal stuck. The HOA had no choice but to write rent payments into their budgets. Homeowners were forced to accept their reality. They could live in their homes, but they'd never fully own them. Banks adjusted, mortgages were rewritten, and the landowner's bank account grew fatter every year. But the psychological damage was permanent. Trust in the HOA collapsed, property values dipped, and the once proud neighborhood carried a scar that never healed. Some families moved away, unable to handle the humiliation. Others stayed, gritting their teeth every time they cut a check to the man they once ignored. And the landowner, he didn't just win financially, he won historically. His story became a cautionary tale told in law schools, business seminars, and community meetings across the country. If you zoom out, you realize this wasn't just about one man and one HOA. This was about the bigger picture of land and power in America. For too long, black families had their land taken through fraud, intimidation, or systemic oppression. This time, the script flipped. The man didn't just protect his land, he turned it into a tool of power. And that's why his story resonates, because it's not just about money, it's about dignity. It's about showing that the very laws once used to oppress can also be used to fight back. So what can we take away from this? First, never underestimate paperwork. A simple deed can be more powerful than $1 million budget. Second, arrogance destroys empires. The HOA thought they were untouchable and their pride became their downfall. Third, patience wins wars. The landowner didn't fight loud. He fought quiet. He waited. And when the time was right, he struck. Do you think he was justified in charging rent to the homeowners? Or do you think he should have let them off easier? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you think. The HOA built 120 homes on land they didn't own. They thought they could erase a black man from the picture, but instead he erased their power. He turned their arrogance into his income. He flipped history on its head. And in the end, he walked away not just with money, but with something far more valuable: respect. Because this wasn't just a fight about dirt and houses. This was about showing that no matter how the odds are stacked against you, sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding all the cards. Watch the next story, you won't believe it.